people are asking this year, maybe you've been there too, it's how are you affected by the downturn? And some would say our sector has been in its very own recession for the past few years. But our debate is about one of the ways our sector will be affected by the financial crisis and by the reaction to it. More government control? Well, like most pieces of accepted wisdom on the pages of the Toronto Star, there is some sense in the notion. I mean, after all, last week even Jim Flaherty was talking about increased regulation for the financial sector, and on second thought, even his budget accepted that government had a role in stimulating economic activity. But let's look carefully at the link. Resolved that as part of a new wave of re-regulation, the life sciences industry should accept the inevitability of more government control and get over it. Is increased government involvement in the pharma sector really an inevitable byproduct of the global financial crisis? So much so that the best course of action for pharma is to make peace with this brave new world? Well, let's take a look at what public sector finances will be over the next few years. Canadian federal deficits of at least $33 billion. Ontario deficits of $18 billion over 2 years. U.S. government deficits too large to make sense of. Now, even if the stimulus programs work, even if the markets hit bottom recently, it will take us several years to work out of this hole. There could be several years when growth will be weak and deficits still large. Years of expenditure restraint. Now, is this an environment when government is going to be creative and looking to hire more civil servants to expand public involvement? Quite the contrary. I saw an article in the newspaper last week about the telecommunications industry. It read, quote, "The Harper government is considering help for Canada's troubled private TV broadcasters, including the possibility of looser regulations." Looser. Now, the relevance to our case? Well, that each issue has to be looked at separately. Now, I was still in government during the last recession. Peter Brenders, I think you were there at the same time. Governments were at that time really interested in economic development, in creating knowledge-intensive jobs, in biotech and pharma research, in hearing what it took to get plant expansions. Even the Ontario government was interested. But things that involved government spending were squeezed. It's true that formulary access was squeezed, definitely. But anything that increased the draw on the public purse, like hiring more Health Canada regulators, was a tough sell. To help shed some workload, government actually favored ramping up self-regulation by industry for aspects of product regulation, registration, and advertising. So also, do you think that the new cross-border fascination in the past 6 months about government's role, do you think that's something that's going to last? I doubt it. I think that stateside we're already seeing signs of some reaction against bailouts and government involvement. So is a prolonged period of economic and fiscal doldrums consistent with the inevitability of more government control? Not so. In some cases, the fiscal constraints puts handcuffs on government, and the economic weakness makes them more sensitive to the health of every industry, including ours. Should we just get over it and wave a white flag? Absolutely not. Getting out of this economic and fiscal hole we are in will take every industry to help make itself more efficient. For pharma, that means discovering better medicines that keep people at their jobs and out of hospitals. Mr. Chairman, should the pharma sector accept the inevitability of more government control and get over it? We are all affected, but to a greater or lesser degree by this crisis, and the next few years may be difficult. But it is important for this sector and for the economy as a whole that we don't wave the white flag to over-regulation, and that we continue to discover and market medicines as efficiently as possible. Mr. Chairman, I vote no.
I would agree with my esteemed colleague that we don't want more government control. I would also agree with him that it's not going away. And I would submit the following comments. I think industry has borne the brunt of poor regulations, and that they've done well in times when regulations created a level playing field, in the market. But it takes a long time to develop a drug. There's a significant risk in the process, and you're required to provide significant data. It's a shame when the regulations let you down or when some companies take shortcuts. Good regulations, including specific requirements for audited controls, serve the industry well. I think that the industry has had an attitude of anti-regulatory culture, and it has left them at the tenons of the bureaucrats and politicians to interpret poor regulations and implement them against the industry. When we go back to 1966, when Emmett Hall put in place the recommendations for the Canada Health Act, the first regulations that I'm speaking of, he made 200 recommendations. Number one recommendation was that pharmaceuticals were medical necessity. Number 5 is that there should be generic compulsory licensing in the country. The pharmaceutical industry was not engaged at making sure that prescription medicines were medically necessary, and we have not been included in the Canada Health Act, and we've borne the brunt of that in regulations ever since. What we did get was Pierre Trudeau elected in 1968 and bringing in compulsory licensing, which again we ignored, and we're still living it.
Thank you.
Well, let's keep this short. Perhaps the real question is about tactics. Should we accept increasing government involvement or continue the fight for the health of the sector? A straightforward question for people in this room, many people in this room. Do we really believe we could trust government to implement a level playing field that would benefit big pharma? I don't think we need more regulations, but rather it's a matter of enforcing the regs we have. And those nutraceutical claims that Greg was talking about, they break the rules that were already on the book, and there's a regime that's coming to get that sector. We hope they arrive eventually. Government is going to be in a tough place in the next few years. We need to select our tactics to recognize that government's appetite may exceed their means for the next little while. At a time of economic weakness, Canada needs to hear from us the policies from the public sector that are needed to keep our industry healthy. It's no time for the white flag, and that means voting no. Thanks very much.
We'll move now to the final vote and decide the debate momentarily. And as you can see, the House believes that the current global financial crisis, product of under-regulation, as part of a new wave of re-regulation, the life sciences industry in Canada and the U.S. should accept the inevitability of more government control and get over it. So it looks like very, very close, probably not within the statistically significant p-value margin of error, but I guess marginally we would have to award the debate to the affirmative side, to Mr. Hines. So congratulations.